let's talk about some of the challenges that we're facing with regard to the police department here in the village, and probably the number one and number two challenges are growth of the village as it relates to the number of calls and services, and the decrease in staffing we've experienced. So as this slide reads here, growth, under the heading of growth, Amelia Village is growing in population every year. The U.S. Census shows the following trends in population. In 1990, our population was 1,837 residents. In 2000, the population was 2,752. In 2008, the population by the U.S. Census showed 3,560 residents. That makes for an average rate of growth from the data provided by the census, indicates that Amelia Village has nearly doubled in population over the last 20 years and has grown by an average of 96 persons per year. In 2002, Village Council elected to eliminate the auxiliary police program and staff the police department with only full-time and part-time compensated police officers. Let me elaborate. The auxiliary program is a volunteer program where you have people in the role of police officer who had completed the required training for a police officer, but were not compensated, and they were here on a volunteer status. So again, in 2002, Council elected to eliminate the auxiliary program. The number of full-time officers serving the village has not increased since 2005. However, one part-time officer has been added since 2005. Talking about population growth again, based on the census data, Amelia Village population growth in the future could look something like this in the future, based on that growth rate of 96 citizens per year. In 2010, a population of 3,752, and you can see by how the population grows all the way up to 2015 at 4,232. Now, I don't know how the economy is going to affect our growth, our future growth, but it's not unreasonable to say that our growth in the past 4 years has not been affected by the economy, which is demonstrated here in this chart. So we'll call it, this slide is entitled Population Growth Compared to Surrounding Communities. And as you can see on this chart, this chart is based on permits issued for construction of single-family homes. And you look here, under Amelia, you've got roughly 160 homes built since 2007. And of the other villages in the area, they're dwarfed by our growth. Batavia had one new home. Bethel, in the last 4 years, 20 new homes. Felicity, one. The closest community to us in growth is New Richmond at roughly 70 homes. Our growth is more than double that. Again, in Williamsburg at less than 10. So while the economy has been upsetting a lot of people's apple carts, personally and in business, it hasn't stopped the growth here in the village, and some of that has been due to the first-time buyer incentives and the new home purchasing incentives. But somebody has found that Amelia is a desirable place to live, and the 170 people who decided to move in here into the village in the last 4 years. And you can see below, in the townships, which are much more sprawling, much more in population. We rival Pierce Township, which is much larger. Actually, we have more growth than Pierce Township. Now, this information is provided. It's on the bottom of the slide here. There's a website. This is on the ClermontCountyOhio.gov site. It shows building activity. So that's where this information came from. Now, that last chart was for, let me go back to it. It was for the permits being issued to build the homes. This next chart demonstrates the occupancy permits. It shows that those homes actually sold. And if you look at the number of homes sold and provided occupancy to, it is right around that 170 homes in the village of Amelia. And again, the same statistics apply here. Our growth is very, very strong here in the village. And what that means from a police standpoint is it increased calls for service brought on by an increased population. Additional challenges faced by the police department is, it speaks to that, increases in calls for service. And it shows that since passage of the 2005 police levy, the Amelia Police Department calls for service have increased by an average of 13.5% per year. Starting in 2005 with 2,731 calls, and in 2006 we received an 18.5% increase in calls. 2007, an additional 11% increase in calls. 2008, 10.8% in increased calls. 2009, 13.7 increased calls. Chief, do you have any stats on 2010 yet? I know we're up.
We're on target for a similar increase for 2010. I think pretty much mirrors the new home sales and occupancies here in the village.
Okay. Now, that being said, so many of the new homes that were built and occupied were a result of that incentive package that came around. But as you can see, not all the other villages in the area enjoyed the same growth that we did, yet they have new subdivisions, and they have, for some reason, to those buyers, Amelia became desirable. I'm not here to say why. I'm just saying that the numbers clearly show is desirable for them. I don't know where the growth is going to go from here, but you can't, at this point, the argument that the economy is bad doesn't apply, because the economy's been bad the last couple of years, and we've experienced phenomenal growth. So I don't have a crystal ball, so if I had to bet, the growth will slow now that the incentives are gone, but I don't really have a way to know that. Additional equipment, patrol cars. The Amelia Police Department has made the final payment on the patrol car it purchased in 2008, and we now own all of our patrol cars. All of the patrol cars will need to be replaced beginning now, because as that chart illustrated, we've got one that's got 37,000 miles on it, but the other two have upwards of 70,000 miles. Amelia Village, due to budgetary constraints, has never been able to purchase a patrol car without incurring finance charges. Under the heading of tasers, due to the shared use of each of his two tasers, Amelia has been forced to repair and replace these tasers much earlier than expected. And the tasers is a mandated thing. The way they're tested and serviced and repaired, there are guidelines that have to be followed, and that's what we work towards achieving. It's not as though they break from overuse. They are used probably most frequently in training exercises. I would imagine. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes.
But those training exercises are not only necessary but mandated. Under the heading of radios, due to the age and extensive use of each of its 5 radios, Amelia Village is forced to continually repair these radios on a regular basis. Due to the fact that Motorola no longer manufactures these radios, once these radios can no longer be repaired, the village will have to replace them with new radios, which cost approximately $5,000 apiece. How old are the radios, Chief?
At least 10 years old.
Bulletproof vests. Due to the age of the bulletproof vests currently used by the police department, Amelia Village will be required to purchase new bulletproof vests for each of its 10 police officers in 2011. And again, approximately half of this expense will be paid for by federal grant money. This next slide is some of what concerns me the most. Most of the time, only one police officer is on duty per shift in the Amelia Police Department. At times, officers need to leave the village to conduct official business at the clerk's office or to take prisoners to the jail in Batavia. During those times, if there's one police officer on and that officer has to leave the village, there would be, during those times, there'd be no police officer on duty on patrol within the village. Amelia police officers must rely on Pierce Township Police Department and or the Sheriff's Office for backup, and these departments are usually providing service to their own constituents and equally busy. There have been times of late where our officer is tied up, we receive another call, and either Pierce Township or the Sheriff's Office is tied up as well, and the response time is less than desirable. To address the need for additional funding, the bottom line is that additional revenue is needed to face the current and future challenges that have been described here tonight. And just a few of the ideas that the additional revenue would be used for in the future would be to replace a retired police officer. In 2009, a more than 20-year veteran of the police department retired, and after a close scrutiny of our finances, it was determined that we simply did not have the financial ability to replace him. We'd like to continue to maintain and improve current response times. Again, going back to the idea of one officer being on duty at a time, there are circumstances where response times are affected. Additionally, we'd like to be able to better cover the new and growing areas of the village. The additional revenue would help us to better handle the increased calls for services. This is a really important thing here. Again, going back to the idea that we have one police officer on duty, this is a really important thing. Increased revenue would be used to increase police officer as well as citizen safety by permitting 2 officers per shift. Despite what may be popular belief, our police officers deal with real crime. They also deal with the Safer Seniors program, the Meals on Wheels program, and they deliver books to the library. But I'm here to tell you, we deal with real crime. And I would not be doing my job as the mayor if I didn't express concern at the fact that not only is it not optimal to have one officer per shift from an officer safety standpoint, but as a resident, I'm not completely comfortable with the idea of one police officer being on hand per shift in the event of some catastrophic emergency that involves my family.